Yeah, if I just talk about, firstly, my experiences. I remember going to kindergarten and the three L's were there, and there was no difference between anyone. We were all the same kids, played together, played cricket, played rugby league together, and there was nothing between us. I came back and then taught here, taught very badly, mathematics, and it was a different feeling. Some antagonism between people, and now I think one of the things that's really impressed me in Australian rugby is their endeavour to reconcile. We still need to do more for Aboriginal kids. We want more Aboriginal kids playing rugby. They've done well in other sports, and we want more playing. We've seen what the Ellas have done for their people, and we want to do more. And I want to be part of it.
So you brought us to the future. I mean, that's what we're all here for, is the future of Australian rugby. How do you, this is part of the challenge, I guess winning helps, but how do you win back fan support, fan loyalty, really re-energise what lies beneath?
Yeah, well, I think, Australian rugby's gone through tough periods before. This is not unusual. If you just look back at when the Ellas came through, in 77 they played for Matraville High, 77 they played for the Australian Schoolboys, went and won everything in the UK. And that set off a movement in Australian rugby, and at that time, there was some time during that time Australia got beaten by Tonga at the cricket ground. And then the Ellas came through and they changed the way the game was played. They changed that spirit of Australian rugby, which was a bit of a mismatch between New South Wales and Queensland, and they changed it back to an aggressive running style of rugby, and they changed the fortunes of Australian rugby that culminated in '84, the Grand Slam, with the world's best coach in Alan Jones. His only competitor is Clive Woodward, but they're having a good go at each other, so one of them will work out who's the greatest coach. And then ended up winning the World Cup in 1991, and then 1999 we won the World Cup, and we want to start that period again because we're not short of talented players here. There's plenty of talented players, but talent doesn't win World Cups. What wins World Cups and wins the hearts of people are teams that play with that same spirit the Ellas had, about being aggressive, playing with a certain panache. That doesn't mean you run with the ball all the time, because kicking can be as artistic as running the ball, but we want to play with certain panache. We want to play tough, so at the end of games, when those tight games, you win those tight games by 1 or 2 points, and that's the traditional Australian digger spirit. We want that in the team, and that's the opportunity for this group of players this year. Where can we take the team? And if we play like that, people will want to watch rugby again. Mark was saying he doesn't want to come and watch us play until we play well. So we need Mark to be at the ground, so we better play well. And that's good to hear. We want that pressure on ourselves. We want to perform, and that's the opportunity for this group of players coming forward. And I'm only a small part of it.
So that's like a cause and effect thing. In a World Cup year, you're renowned for your hard work. You'll have the players working very hard, I would imagine. What role can the rugby community play? How can they get involved in being part of the journey to not only this World Cup, but the next one?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, I reckon we've got to draw a line in the sand of where we've been and work out where we want to go and have that picture in our head, and I've just told you the sort of side we want to be. And then everyone needs to roll their sleeves up. So if you're cooking sausages down at Willoughby number 8s, or you're thinking about getting a stand subscription, do it. We need people to want to support rugby. Ideally, imagine the first round of Super Rugby and we've got record crowds at every game. What sort of message does that send to the rugby community about Australian rugby being revitalised again? But we can't do it by ourselves. The team will do their bit, but we need everyone in the rugby community to find a bit more. And they can, and there's plenty of people who love rugby when the Wallabies win. So we've got to win, but we need them to maybe help start it a little bit more. So we need everyone to do their bit in rugby.
Hamish, to you, that's obviously a compelling vision. We all want to be a part of that. What can RA do? I mean, you're almost the overseer of the game in many ways in Australia. What can RA do to help that?
Eddie touched on a really important point. It's not just one person that's going to bring the game back, and it's a wonderful game to watch and to play and to be a part of for both boys and girls. But we need everyone to lean into it. So 800 million people around the world, as you said, play and watch the game. And so it's a massive, massive event and a wonderful code to watch. So again, as Andy said, just from the grassroots right through the top tiers of the game, we need everyone to lean in and help. We'll do our bit to help facilitate whatever needs to happen. But again, this is a line in the sand today in terms of how we take the game forward again. And for me, it's almost, we're bringing it back to its spiritual home. And to have the Ella brothers here with Eddie is really special.
Can you give us, and I don't know how much you can give away, but an insight into your working relationship? From the outside, it looks like there are two people who might gel pretty well because you don't mind ruffling feathers, you don't mind stepping on a few toes. How's that working relationship going so far?
So far, so good, I think, mate. So, look, I think Eddie and I and Andy and the board think pretty much the same way. So we were unanimous in our decision to get Eddie back. And that's because he's tough, and I love the fact that he talks about the digger spirit. And he reflects on his time here. So, this is not the wealthiest part of Sydney, but it's bred great footballers and great sports people. And rugby is a game for all people, so I think it's an incredibly exciting time for our code.
And as chair, you have to have, a finger on the pulse of the game to an extent. Have you felt a shift in attitude, emotion, a re-energised Australian rugby public simply as a result of the appointment?
Yeah, undoubtedly. The amount of feedback, it's near universal, 100% approval for Eddie coming back. Everyone's really excited. Eddie touched on the first round of Super. So again, all those fans that are getting re-engaged with the sport, come and buy a ticket. That's the greatest thing you can do for us in the medium term.
And Andy, I know that you have more probably a day-to-day gauge on what's happening, and in a very microcosm of RA, the building itself, Eddie's had his feet under the table, he's been in, he's had a look around. That energy that we're talking about for the rugby community in general, do you feel that's happened within the building just because Eddie's been part of it so far?
Absolutely. I think we saw it on Sunday when he arrived from Japan, and he came, first place he went to was the office and walked around and got familiar with the place, and obviously staff and players were there, and it was really good. I think the important thing for us is it's wonderful to have a coach in the office. That creates a lot of energy, it creates a lot of excitement, and we've seen in the short time that he's been back, it's not only about the rugby players, it's about the community and the supporters and the fans. They're all engaged, and I can only echo what both Hamish and Eddie have said. The game is a team game. It's about everybody ripping in and working together to get the right outcome, and it's about us all putting our shoulder to the wheel and driving this game forward. It's an exciting time in this country.
You're not only, or more on that, I guess, you're not only the boss, clearly the high performance side of things. You go way down as far as the game goes in Australia. How do you suggest that everyone can hop on board and be a part of the journey?
Oh, it's like Eddie said, from flipping sausages at your local rugby club to helping out painting the lines, encouraging your kids to encourage their friends to come down and play. I think the thing that we've got very unique in the game of rugby union, as opposed to other games, is the values that the game espouses and what it means in the sense of community and camaraderie and brother and sisterhood that we've got through the game. So those are great opportunities and great levers for us to pull at the community game. And as I said on my appointment nearly 2 years ago to the day, the most important way that we can re-engage the community and re-engage the rugby fraternity is by producing winning teams. And that's not only our teams in gold, but also our teams at super level, at our under 20s. That's the way we're going to engage people. Shoot Shield, Hospital Cup. So there's a collective challenge not only to Eddie, but to everyone. Let's put good winning performances out and play entertaining, attractive rugby, and the people will come.
Good stuff. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to open up questions. Eddie and Hamish and Andy, I think 25 to 30 minutes. We'll attempt to get a microphone too, so if you can raise your hand, state your name, where you're from, and ask your question. So Who'd like to start? Hey, no, Nathan.
I guess I'll start with Andy. You mentioned you've been in this role for about 2 years. Disappointment in terms of how big of this is a moment since you've been here in terms of where does it rate in sort of setting up the future of Australian rugby?
Oh, it rates right up there at the top. We've got a clear view of what we need to do for the next 10 years through this golden decade that we've got happening in our country, and having somebody of Eddie's calibre, his credentials, being a world-class coach to come and lead our flagship program and then oversee a really important part of our women's growth and development I think it's just really going to catapult the whole rugby ecosystem forward for us.
I guess one for Eddie, the last 2 jobs they've had with England and Japan really left a legacy there in terms of setting their programs up for the future. And then it's a 5-year deal, you're going to have a long time within this job. In an ideal world, what does that legacy look like for Rugby Australia and rugby heading forward?
Oh, well, it's only a year, mate. We've got to win the World Cup. Our target's to win the World Cup. We win the World Cup, it changes things for rugby in Australia. So our target's to win the World Cup, then we'll worry about what happens after. And to win the World Cup, we're going to take this talented group of players are going to have to work together to make a team that has a competitive edge over the rest of the world. And if you look at World Rugby at the moment, there's 6 teams not separated by a cigarette paper. They're so tight, and the team that learns the most over the next 9 months will be the team that lifts the William Webb Ellis Trophy in Stade de France on the 28th of October at about 11 p.m. And we're intending that to be us. And then from that, kids that want to play rugby. You saw out there, we went out to school, the kids there were Year 7 kids, most of them played soccer, because they watched the Socceroos, they're excited about what the Matildas are going to do in the Women's World Cup, and there was a small number of rugby. When we were at school here, when Gary and Mark and Glenn and Storsey were here, it would have been the opposite. They were all rugby kids and a few kids that play soccer. So we need to create role models and we need to create heroes for the young kids.
You're famous for your intensity. When you were a coach here in 2005, you were spoken about being too hard on players and you mellowed since, but then exiting England, you felt like you maybe mellowed too much. Where is the Eddie Jones of today compared to the Eddie Jones of the past?
Look, for every team you coach, and since Australia in 2005, I've coached a few teams, you've got to just find the right spot for those players. What's the right spot to get them absolutely motivated? Because when we're talking about motivation, everyone in this room at the moment thinks they're concentrating at 100%. Everyone thinks that, and every player thinks they're playing at 100%. But what we know is that the human being has so much more in them. So what we're trying to find is that discretionary 5 to 10% where the ball goes over your head and you make a decision on whether you run hard or you don't run hard. That's what we're looking for. And so I don't know how I'm going to have to coach the Wallabies, whether I'm going to have to be hard or I'm going to have to be supportive or I'm going to have to challenge or what Big Street is until I get the players. What I do know is that our players don't lack talent. They don't lack talent. If you did a World 15 today on talent, you'd have a fair few Australian players in there. You just got to look potentially at the back line Australia could have, potentially. And you're thinking, is there a better back line in the world? Now, but that does, again, as I said, that doesn't win your test matches. What wins your test matches is that whether you're going to run hard to do that inside clean, whether you're going to go back over your head, whether you're going to chase that kick. And so I need to find the right balance there. And it's not just the head coach, it's the assistant coaches. Because when you think of modern rugby now, and you think of how much work's done to prepare a team, the vast majority of the work is done by the assistant coaches. Now, I've got a role to play, so we've got to find the right level of coaching for those players so they want to give a bit more. They want to give a bit more. Then when they give a bit more, they want to give a bit more again. It's that old thing, Rogers Bannister breaks a 4-minute mile. So when he breaks a 4-minute mile, they say at that time, the medical history says your body disintegrates. You can't run that fast. You can't run that fast. Then next year, what happens? 6 or 7 people run the 4-minute mile. The Kenyan breaks the 2-hour marathon. Next day, the women marathon runner breaks the world record. So our players don't know how good they can be, and I've got a role in trying to prod them, sometimes cajoling them, sometimes loving them, whatever word you want to use to get a bit more out of them, and see where we can take them, mate.
Hey, it's on this from Herald. Can you just give us a roadmap of the next few months, what that looks like, when exactly you want to go meet the super clubs, when you'd like to have your assistants wrapped up by, and just what you need in order to follow that process?
Yeah, well, there's 3 big things, mate. 1, the staff, 2, the players, and 3, the way we play. So I used to have plans after plans. I used to have paper everywhere. And one of the things age teaches you is don't have an idea in your head, but don't get too set to a plan. So we've just got to knock them off as we go along. But we'll be out. I'll be out on Saturday at where is it on Saturday? Griffith. Cookie, we used to play a trial there, didn't we, in the old days? I hope they behave a bit better than you did, mate. Hey, half the game. I'm a bit worried about the young blokes these days. Might have to get you out there as a Rugby president and make sure they behave. But no, I'll be out there. I'll be out there on Saturday. Saturday week I'll be at Narrabri. So I aim to get out to those Super Rugby teams, meet the coaching staff, because the Super Rugby coaching staff, just as we were talking about, everyone's in this together. They've got a huge role to prepare the players well. Huge role to prepare the players well. And we want to make sure we do that collaboratively. And then I'll speak to the players as we go around, and then we'll get our staff worked out. Again, I can't get our staff worked out until I know what the players need. It's not what I need, it's what the players need. So we'll work that out and we'll get that done, mate. By the time we're ready for the first game in Pretoria, we'll be ready to go, mate.
Lastly from me, Eddie, so much has made your record of World Cups, the 2003 World Cup and 2019 as well. Does that burn you? Is that still a personal motivation given how close you came on those occasions?
I lost those silver medals somewhere, mate. I think they're in the Indian Nations. So last time I moved country, it was from South Africa back to England. So I had about 5 boxes that included a gold medal and 2 silver medals. And I never got them back. So they're probably in some bazaar in Cape Town being sold. So I've forgotten about them, mate. Like, the only thing that matters now is what we do together on each day and how we can get better. That's the only thing that matters, how we can get better. And we want pride back in Australian rugby. As we said, we've been through a tough period. We want pride back. That's the most important thing, mate.
Christy?
Chris, enjoying the role. Eddie, you spoke about the World Cup a lot. Where does the Bledisloe Cup rank? It's been 22 years or so, 21 years. Is that priority number 1? Because Australians often compare themselves to those across the ditch.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty important. It just, when I was joking there with Cookie, it reminded me of because we're playing in Dunedin, aren't we? When we won it, or we retained it, I think we won it, I can't remember. We won it 2021 in Dunedin. And Googie was part of that, and the party we had afterwards was fantastic. Steve Larkham, who's one of our Super Rugby coaches now, was brilliant on that day. The way he manipulated the space against the Kiwis. And that's a big target for us, because we know as Australians, if we can take New Zealand, then we're in a good position to take the World Cup. So we'll certainly be prioritising that. But again, it won't be the be-all and end-all, because the World Cup is a major tournament. But certainly, we've got a home game against them in Melbourne, where we hope to have a sellout crowd, which will be a great occasion. And we know that the last time the Australians played there, the referee made a difficult decision at the end of the game, and he's still recovering from it. And Australia went close, and it's a ground, Melbourne cricket ground, where Australia traditionally play well. So that we can get the lead in the series, then go to Dunedin. What a fabulous place to win back the Bledisloe Cup. So that's the picture in the head, mate. Well, some 10s can be inexperienced at 30, mate. and some 10s can be experienced at 23. So it just depends on their ability to put all the bits and pieces together, put the information they get from the outside, look at the speed of the ball, their communication with their 9. Yeah, I watched, at the end of the last England tour, I watched Ed Mead and Donaldson play against each other, Eastwood versus Randwick down at Coogee Oval. And both of them have got a lot to like about. And Donaldson played well on the last tour. So he's a young guy coming through and he looks like he's got a good head on him. So who knows, mate? And there's great competition there. You know, we've hopefully got Quaid coming back. Foley's playing well in Japan. O'Connor will be fit for the Reds, and then you've got Leosao at the Brumbies, a young guy who's had some experience at Test rugby. So it's going to be competitive, but we're definitely going to have to decide a hierarchy of 10s, because that cohesive part, which Ben Darwin makes a living out of now. Like, he had to make a living out of something, Googie, didn't he? He's made a living out of cohesion. But it's true what he says. You know, you want cohesiveness, particularly in the spine of your team. So we'll try to get to that as quickly as we can.
It's Sam Wellington from Stan. I was just wondering, obviously played against the Wallabies a lot with England in recent years and had a very strong record there in recent times. What areas do you think you were able to expose that you now need to work on to improve the team going forward?
Well, it was better than strong, mate. Hey? Come on. It was better than strong. It was fantastic. Look, what we did with England against Australia is really redundant now. It's what the Australian team does now. And, you know, as we've discussed, it's been a tough period, and I think maybe COVID's been a difficult time for Australia and New Zealand rugby, that they were isolated for a long period, but we don't have any excuses now. So it's really important that this Australian team, and we saw on the last tour how many games they lost closely, that defines you as a test team. It's how many of those close games you win. Like, when you're playing really well and the opposition are playing poorly, you'll win that game. But it's those games where you're both at about 85, 90%. Yeah, you get one or two decisions against you, and then the emotional state of the team comes through. Like, every team starts a game excited, don't they? Every team starts a game excited. Like, you don't see a team walking on the field with their head down, shoulders draped. They all start excited. But it's then the team that is able to cope with the disappointment in the game, understand they're disappointed, and then bounce back quickly and work out a way to get back on the front foot. And maybe we need to do that a little bit better, which is not a uncommon thing with teams who haven't been winning. So that emotional state work will need to do a bit on that.
Just to follow up, what do you think the public's biggest misconception of you is? There's so much written about you in this tough taskmaster sort of image. Can you paint a different picture that behind the scenes that people won't know about?
Well, I don't think it really matters, mate, what people paint of you, because the only thing that matters is my relationship with the players. And I'm sure they don't read a lot of the garbage that's written by these blokes. And if they do, they're not smart enough to play for the Wallabies, right? So they'll be reading your columns and saying, oh, this and this and this. But what we'll be worried about is developing good relationships with the players, making sure that the environment gives them what they need. You know, it's what the players need. You know, as coaches, we're just servants to the players.
I'm Emma from TV3 New Zealand. How important is the rivalry between our two countries to you, and what have you made of the All Blacks' performance in recent seasons?
Great to have a Kiwi here, isn't it? Just evens out the room a little bit. Huh? No, nice to have you here. Sorry, what was your name again? Emma. It's sometimes a bit hard to understand with that New Zealand accent. Emma, yeah. Well, you know, I think the Kiwis have done really well. You know, they went through that tough period last year where, yeah, if they lost that game in Johannesburg, there might have been a change of coach, and they battled through, won the rugby championship, and then had a really good end of season tour. And they've gone through that bit of transitional period where they've had a great a great team from 2012 to 2016. Maybe coming off a little bit 2017 to 2019, and now they've had to rejig the team. So I think they've done really well. They've always got great talent coming through, and I'm sure we'll see that in Super Rugby. Good coach in Ian Foster, good support coaches in Joe Smith and the young bloke from the Crusaders. He does a good job there. So I think they're in a pretty good spot. But we're coming after them. We're going to be chasing them down the street. And that's a good thing, and we want that rivalry to be tough. And I think New Zealand want it as well, so we'll make sure we're chasing them.
Excuse me. Eddie, hi, it's Nick Morning from Voices. We've already referenced your brilliant record as England coach against Australia. Can Australian fans look forward to a similar record against England, now you're back in charge of Australia, and would that give you any particular pleasure?
Not really, mate. The most important thing for Australia is to do well whoever they're playing next. England's a chapter which I enjoyed, loved it, but it's closed, and now we're just moving on to the next game, which will be against South Africa in Pretoria. So that's the only thing we're worried about. So I can't give you any headline there, mate. I know what you'd like, but I can't give it to you.
Eddie, Zach Bailey from 9 News. We hear in professional sport a lot the word culture. Do you have to look back to some greats of Australian rugby to maybe bring back the DNA to remind them of the history of the jersey, especially the younger guys that may not know too much about it, so that they can have one or 5% of the World Cup?
Yeah, well, I think, culture's a set of behaviours. It's how your group decides they want to behave, and a rugby team is put together to win games of rugby. We want to win games of rugby. It means getting up the other end of the field as quickly as you can and stopping the other mob coming to your end of the field. And to do that, you have to have an understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. You have to have an understanding of sometimes things that have gone on before and sometimes things that are culturally appropriate. Australia's a very diverse society now, and if I just look at the player pools in Super Rugby, it's far different from when I was here before. So we need to understand that, but the one thing we need to have is a Wallaby culture, and there's guys who have been in the Wallaby culture who knows when it's good and knows when it's not good. And sometimes that historical reflection of what was good and not good can be useful, and sometimes it can be unuseful. So we'll definitely be looking at players from previous era that can add to the understanding. I know George was over there. George Gregan was over there on the previous tour. I was just talking to Morgan, who's in charge of the Classic Wallabies, about how we involve them. But that could be important going forward, mate.
And just on that, a couple of former players, when you were appointed or was announced that you would be taking over, I think Matt Giddo said some of the current Wallabies don't know what's going to hit them. Lonnie Takiri said every player that's in your camp should pack a mirror. Should the current crop of Wallabies...
That came from Lottie.
Get ready to look at themselves in the mirror. Should current Wallabies be worried or excited about getting into camp and you getting in their hands?
Well, mate, I don't really care. Because at the end of the day, Super Rugby, they select themselves or they deselect themselves. So whether they're worried, excited, doesn't concern me. I want them to be at their best, and the best they can produce in Super Rugby. If they're at their best in producing Super Rugby and they're the top 2 or 3 in their position, they'll be in the Wallabies. And then they'll be excited, mate, because they will be excited. Because then they're going to go on a journey that's going to change Australian rugby. And if they miss out, they're going to be so disappointed, because they're going to be sitting at home and they're going to be watching a Wallaby team do things that they'd like to be part of. And then they might work a bit harder and they might get in the team. No door will be closed, but, what is their mental state at the moment, I don't really care, mate.
So would you encourage players to take them
I don't know whether they can get a sponsorship for a mirror. If they can get a sponsorship for a mirror, fair enough. Because most young blokes don't buy things themselves, do they?
We'll find one.
So we'll find a sponsorship for mirrors, and then we'll make sure that's part of the selection package.
Eddie, Jamie Pandara from News Corp. Having watched the 2 decades of Bledisloe failure, your own streak against the Wallabies as England coach, is mental scarring a factor, do you believe, and do you have any immediate way to try and challenge that?
Well, just look at the Springboks in 2018. I think 2016, 2017, 2018, the Springboks had a winning record of under 30%. Rassie Erasmus comes in, sets a light tick-tock, and the team changes, doesn't it? I don't know whether TikTok changed them or Rassie changed them, or Rassie on TikTok changed them. But he changed the team, and they immediately went from a team that was probably the weakest of the three, or one of the weakest in the Rugby Championship, to World Cup champions. So mental scarring is not a factor in sport. It's the ability of a player to want to be their best. That's the most important thing. So all we want is players who want to be their best. And if they want to be their best, then any previous experience they'll cope with. So I'm not worried about the history of that. I'm worried about the team gelling, getting together, getting the Wallaby culture that we want, being tough on each other, being tough towards the opposition, and those close losses will turn into close wins. And you just got to look at the golden period. Like when I was coaching Australia previously, you know, everyone remembers that Kefu try. Well, before that Kefu try, we were getting beaten. And Kefu does something great, scores the try, and we win the game. And it ends up with the All Black coach resigning. You know, and that's the difference in sport. And what we've got to get the players is to believe that they can do it. And you believe when you get confidence, and you get confidence by repeated success. And repeated success comes from training well. So, you know, there's a step ladder to it, and we'll make sure that's in place, mate.
I mean, you've only just started. Is there one thing you've already decided you're going to change?
Oh yeah, no, I've got a tip. They're going to all have a mirror from now on. Like that's part of it. You see them at Super Rugby, they'll come in with a mirror.
Eddie, some of your former players like James Haskins had a bit of angst at the RFU, didn't see fit for a no-compete clause in your exit. Can I get a perspective from you on it, and from you as well, Hamish, whether you think that would be a mistake that into
I love Hask. He's one of the best, mate. Always, he tells us a great story, Haskell. You know, the first team meeting we had, they hadn't made the playoffs in the World Cup, you know, 2015 World Cup, and got in. You know, had a bit of a chat. Said, you know, you're good enough to win the Six Nations, which is coming up. And then I saw Haskell at the back. I knew a little bit. I'd had dinner with him a few times. I said, Hask, how's your finger strength? And he said, oh yeah, not bad. I said, well, it better be, because you're just hanging on, mate. And ever since then, he's been my best mate. And he's a terrific guy. But look, England's for me is done, mate. I don't have any want to talk about it or any care about what happens, because I loved it, but it's finished, mate.
I was surprised there was no non-compete there. I'm glad there wasn't, and delighted where we ended up.
Question for Andy, as Chief Executive. World Cup's coming up. What's your expectations of Wallabies' performance there? Have you cut any more slack given he hasn't got the full cycle heading into that tournament?
Mate, he's been pretty clear. He's going there to win, and that's why we brought him back. And the expectation is that we'll win the World Cup.
So that's why I'm renting, not buying, mate.
Have you had a conversation around overseas players, eligibility?
Yeah, everyone's available, mate. Whole box and dice. We haven't discussed it yet, but we will.
Whatever he wants.
Would you like more than three?
No, look, at the appropriate time, we'll have a chat about it. Look, I understand the rationale of the law, and it's important to keep players playing in Australia. I think that's important. And we need to have a discussion about it. Is that going to affect our chance of winning the World Cup? Then if it is, then there may be an option to change it. I'm not sure, mate, but at the appropriate time we'll have a chat.
And this World Cup cycle, the next one, is a bit different. There's a line series in the middle. Do you think that will change how you approach things in the past? You've perhaps changed the side a little bit to develop and make sure that they're ready for the World Cup. Do you think you'll be able to do that with the line series?
Mate, I'm really not looking at that at this stage. I've been here 2 days and we've got 9.5, I think 160 days to the first Wallaby game. That's all I'm worried about at the moment. I worry about those things post the World Cup.
Hey, Nathan Williamson from Rugby.com.au. You touched on Super Rugby and the importance of that. I guess how important is it to ensure the Australian games are getting early success over their Kiwi counterparts, just to build that confidence heading into an important year?
Well, I think we want the Super Rugby teams winning. I think you come in from a Super Rugby campaign and you've won and you feel good about yourself, and if you feel good about yourself, you work a bit harder. Because at the end of the day, it's about how much effort you put into the game. And so we want to be supportive of the Super Rugby teams, want to make sure they've got their best players available in the best condition, and we'll do everything we can from a coaching point of view and from a strength and conditioning point of view and from a medical point of view to ensure that happens, because we want players coming into camp who have had some success. And obviously, they have success in local derbies, and they can also have success against the New Zealand teams.
Just a quick one on the Wallabies link. How do you look to work with their head coach and their coaching staff heading into the future?
Yeah, it's very much an overseeing role, making sure that, we haven't worked out the exact mechanics of it, but having a constant dialogue between the Wallaroos coaching staff and myself to ensure that their plans are in the right direction and they're making the necessary adaptations and adjustments to their program to get the most out of the players. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's quite unique in world rugby to be able to do that, so I'm looking forward to that, mate.
We've got time for 2 more.
Hi, it's Brendan Carroll from the New South Wales Sports Hires Association. Our members of the 7 government sports hires across New South Wales. Just get a perspective on whether you have perspective on what should be happening in the school level to support the next 10 years of rugby, and in particular government high schools as well.
Right, well, I think in Australia, where's the acting principal? Where is he? Big fella. Scouser. He barracks for Liverpool. He's having a tough time. So I've got to be nice to him. The coach isn't happy, mate, hey, at the moment. It's got not enough money. And it's a bit like government schools, isn't it? They all want more money. The government has a certain amount to spend. But, having been a teacher myself and having been an acting principal for 18 months, you understand the importance of a well-rounded curriculum, and you understand that the academic part's super important, but the sport and the physical activity and recreation is so important. And sometimes you need to remind the government a bit strongly than others, because when pennies get tight, the sport's always the one to go. And that can have longer term effects on your population, and as a result, it can have a long-term effect on the health of your country. So, you guys need to just keep beating the drum and reinforcing how important sport and physical activity is for young people today. Because we all know we're going through this, I don't know what you call it, technology disruption to our lives. School teachers now, I just saw in South Australia, mate, they banned mobile phones in high schools. They banned them. And I'm reading this book at the moment called Reconnect, which is written by these American school teachers on how young people now, because they spend a lot of their time in isolation, on their phones, that the school environment's got to create a sense of belonging for them. Got to create a sense that they want to come there and be part of something that's bigger than them. Because as human beings, that's why we're at the top of the animal kingdom. Because we like to work together, And sometimes we've just got to find ways to remind the government it's more than just money. You know, that there's the welfare of the young people in question here.
Eddie, George Clark from AAP. Given the fortunes of the Wallabies and the game over the last couple of years, how does it sit with you on a personal level, being held up as the Messiah to fix it all?
Yeah, well, I think I made the point today, I'm not the Messiah. Everyone's in this together, we're all working in this together. But sometimes you just need someone to beat the drum, and that gets other people walking a bit faster. And maybe that's the role at the moment, but as we go forward, it's going to be about everyone working together. You know, that parent who wants to take their kid to the rugby training, but Netflix, whatever's on at the moment, stays at home, has got to make that decision to do a bit more. So we need everyone to do it, mate, including yourself, including the media. We need you guys to beat the drum.